In today's lesson, we're going to make this scroll animation where as we scroll through the page, we're going to animate this credit card by rotating it from left to right, and at the same time, animate a specular highlight across the surface of the card to create something beautiful like this. Now, to build this interaction, we'll do this in 2 steps. First, we'll build the card and set everything up there, and then we'll move into building the interactions. So with that, let's go ahead and start with building the card. So first, we're going to come up to the Add panel here, and we will add our div block. We'll just drop that right in here, right there. And with that in place, let's come over and let's get our credit card image and drop that right inside that div block. Super easy, just like that. Now, before we do anything, I want to resize the card here just to kind of get it in the right scale for our call to action form here. Somewhere about right there should do it. Very good. Then we're going to come back over into the Assets panel, and let's grab our specular highlight. Also going to drop that into the div block, but I want to place that above the credit card image because we want that to show on top. Let me first kind of clean things up here. So for our div block, let's put that in a class, and we're going to call that card wrapper. And then for the what is called card shine, this is our specular highlight. We'll just call it shine just to keep it simple. And then for our credit card, we'll just call that credit card image. Now, you'll notice a couple of things. So we have the specular highlight, which is just taking up room here. It's not sitting over the card like we'd like it. So to take care of that, I'm going to select the shine, and I'm going to come over here into position, and I'm going to change that to absolute. Now, by changing that to absolute, it took it out of the document order and put it on top of everything. But in fact, we really only want it on top of the card wrapper. So to do that, we'll come up and select the card wrapper and set its position to relative. Now the specular highlight is absolutely positioned relative to the card wrapper, exactly how we want it. Next up, we're going to go and add a box shadow to our card wrapper. Drop on down here to the effects section. We're going to add our drop shadow. And there are a few things. So we're going to go with an outside shadow. And what we want to do is we want to actually move this up. As I hold down the Option key, I can change that, and we'll move that down somewhere around here. I'm going to increase the blur massively. So again, I'm going to hold down the Option key, hover over the value here. That's looking pretty good. Now the size, I actually want to move this. Let's kind of hide it underneath the card by moving it to the left a little bit. And again, I can hover over the numbers here. That gives me a lot of room to move things around. Very subtle there. So I can come into the color and actually change the opacity, make it darker, and maybe kind of tune that in a little bit. We'll go with that, 53. That'll work for us. Okay, good. But you'll notice that the specular highlight is sort of bleeding out into the shadow itself. To solve that, we'll go ahead and select the card wrapper and come over here and set the overflow to hidden. And what that does is anything that spills outside of the card wrapper becomes hidden. So it takes care of that specular highlight that was kind of sticking out at the bottom. All right, now there's one other thing that we need to take care of as we're getting set up here. And that is, you'll notice that our credit card has rounded corners, but our card wrapper has square corners. So you can't really see it here, but if we had a darker background, you would notice that the specular highlight would actually shine through on those corners. And we don't want that because that would be unrealistic. That would be something that wouldn't happen in the real world. So what we're going to do is, again, with the card wrapper selected, we want to add a border radius. So I'm going to come down here again to borders, and I'm going to add some border radius. And you'll notice I'm going to go ahead and push it really far, and you'll notice it'll start to make a different rounding on the corners of the card. I don't want to round the corners of the card any farther, but what I want to do is back off until we're not getting any more additional rounding on the card. So what we're doing is we're essentially taking that card wrapper and we're adding border radius to that so that nothing will bleed outside of that as we do the animation. Now, the specular highlight is kind of intense, and we don't really want that to scream. We want it to be more subtle. So I'm going to select Shine, and I'm going to change the blending mode a little bit here. We can try a few different ones here. Some of them are so subtle that it disappears, but we're probably going to go with soft light. A little bit less obvious, but still very much present. So I think we're good there. The next thing we need to do is, again, come back up to the card wrapper. And as we're adding this interaction, we have to make sure that this is actually has a 3D effect on it. So rather than being an isometric kind of effect, which wouldn't look that great, we actually want to add a 3D effect. And so the way we do that is we come down here to the effects, and we're going to come into our 2D and 3D transforms, click on the 3 tiny dots here, and we're going to add self-perspective. And specifically in this case, let's add 1500 self-perspective. Now, the reason I choose 1500 pixels is If you have something very close to the object that you're trying to add this 3D perspective to, any little change is very dramatic. And we don't want it to be very dramatic. We just want it to have a 3D perspective, but we want it to be fairly subtle. So we're using a fairly large value, in this case, 1500 pixels to achieve that effect. So we should be good there. And with that, our card is built, and now we're ready to move on to the interactions. So let's go to step number 2. With the card wrapper selected, I'm going to come up here to the interactions panel. And the first thing I want to check here is make sure that our version is set to interactions with GSAP. Those are our new interactions here in Webflow. And then I'm going to create a scroll interaction by clicking on scroll. Let's go ahead and give this a name, and we'll just call this our card animation for our overall interaction. And then we're set to create our first action. So I'll go ahead and click on the plus here, and we're going to choose a custom animation here. And let's go ahead and change this one. We'll call this card rotate. This is the first one that we'll do, and this will be rotating the card. So what we want to do is, first of all, for this trigger element, we choose our target. We choose what it is we want to animate as part of this action. So if I click on this, we're going to go ahead and stick with the default, because all we're trying to do here is we're targeting our element, which in this case is the card wrapper. So we're just going to leave this at the defaults. It's the same thing that we're using for the trigger. Okay, now to rotate this, I want to have both a type of from and to, because I'm animating it from when the card comes up into the viewport to a point where it leaves the viewport. So I have it set to from and to, and I'm going to go ahead and click plus here. What we're trying to do is a rotate Y. So we're rotating the card along the Y axis. And what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and choose values for the rotate Y from both the from and to. Now, to see this, I'm going to scroll up on the canvas so that the card is within the viewport. And we'll go ahead and hold down the Option key and choose a value, and you'll see it kind of hopped out of the screen here. So we'll bring that back in, but maybe I'll kind of eyeball it here. Maybe it starts at -35. That seems about right. Again, we're trying to be subtle here. So as it's off the screen and just coming into the viewport, it's going to start at -35. And let's move it up here and let's change our out rotation, maybe about to the same 35 there. So now as we scroll, you'll see it does the rotation for us. And you can see it looks three-dimensional. And that's all there is to that first action. So we can pop out of here, and we're good on that one. Let's add our second action. In this case, this is the card specular highlight. We want to move that across the card as we scroll. So I'll click on the plus for actions, and again, add a custom action. Let's rename that. We're going to call this the spec move. And in this case, we do want to change our target. And the reason why we want to do that is that now, again, this interaction is placed on the card wrapper, but what we're trying to animate here is just the specular highlight. So we have to kind of use a more particular type of target. And so we're going to change this from the trigger element to a class, and we'll just come in here, and the name of our class for the specular highlight is shine. And so we've selected that. Now, this is going to target that shine as the thing that we're animating here. So we can click out of that. Again, on this, we want a type of from and to. And in this case, we're just moving it. So I'm going to go ahead and press the Option button on my keyboard here and move the specular highlight off. Somewhere in that range is good. And then I can just do the same, kind of the inverse of that over here. I'll just put 400 pixels on the out. Click out of that. And then as we scroll now, we should see that specular highlight move across. Ooh, but something funny is going on here. Do you notice that? We scroll up. The card animates, it rotates, and then the specular highlight comes. So we want all that to happen at the same time. And there are a couple of ways we can achieve that. We have our timeline down here at the bottom. And if I just kind of pinch to zoom, I can change the overall scale that we're looking at here. So I can just grab the specular highlight move and move that over to the left so that it happens at the same time. Or if I undo here, another way I can achieve that is just change the start time to 0, just like that. Now you'll notice as I scroll here, the specular highlight is animating at the same time that we're rotating the card. We are going to have so many people entering their data into this form that we're not going to know how to keep up with all the new card requests. There's one other thing I'd like to cover here. If I wanted to change the animation a little bit, maybe hold off on starting the animation until the card got up into the viewport, what we could do is we'd come up here into our scroll trigger, and I can change this right here. So the start, and what we're doing is we're saying when the top of the element gets to the bottom of the viewport, start the animation. But I could change this, and I could actually say for the viewport, I could say center instead. So when the top of the element gets to the center of the viewport, then start the animation. And what that would look like is something a little bit more like this. So as we get to the center, then it starts to animate. Now, I would actually not do that in this particular case, but just so that you're aware, that is a possibility as well if you wanted to kind of hold off on the animation until it gets to the center of the viewport. So that's how you can do a scroll animation with a card rotating and a specular highlight sweeping across it. Get out there and make some great interactions.